Now, providing access to this data about what we hold in our collections around Australia and the germination science is where the virtual seed bank portal comes in. Now, this portal is part of the Atlas of Living Australia infrastructure platform, which you'd all be aware provides that open access to Australia's biodiversity data. Our seed bank portal is refreshed annually to take on new collecting activity, that is new accessions and collections, and any completed germination results. Now, the portal is a fabulous resource for scientists and on-ground practitioners that are involved in plant recovery and restoration. But importantly, it also provides a level of transparency about how we as a nation are tracking against some of those global and national targets, particularly preventing plant extinctions through our ex situ conservation work. It gives us a chance to see how we're tracking against some of those national strategies, the Threatened Species Action Plan, the Oz Strategy for Nature, and the various state and territory strategies and programs. Finally, a big part of our work is about today, sharing knowledge and awareness about plant conservation through webinars, articles, and social media. Brad will place our social media links in the chat so you can follow along and hear the stories about the amazing work of our partners. And the question function is also operational. So if you've got some questions for Jack, we'll have a short Q&A after Jack's presentation. So Jack's going to take us inside the portal. We're really chuffed to have Jack here today. He's based up in Townsville and is part of the ALA team. He's a very gifted software engineer and he designs and delivers exactly the sort of platforms that we'll be exploring. We work very closely with the ALA team to actually talk about enhancements, ways we can change the way we're presenting that information, and Jack's going to share some of the new features with you today. So Jack, I think we'll hand over to you. Don't forget those questions in the chat. Brad will also provide a link to the portal so you can lose lots of hours of your life having a play after this. Thank you, Jack.
Awesome. Thank you for that lovely introduction. Is everyone able to see my screen okay before I get cracking? Awesome. So before I begin, I would also like to echo Catherine's acknowledgements and also acknowledge the Bindal and Woolgooroo Gubar First Nations people as the traditional owners of the land from which I'm joining from, which, as Catherine mentioned, was Townsville. So today I'm just going to be providing a walkthrough of the functionality of the portal and just demonstrate a few things that the portal offers in terms of seed collections and seed data. Before I dive in immediately, I just wanted to provide some context that this system, when first developed, was new for the ALA in that it allowed us to model the relationship of seed collections and subsequent testing. So as I'm sure many of you are aware, seed is collected from the field. It is accessioned into a seed bank. One or more trials are conducted on the accession seed, and different treatments can be applied to determine which yields the best germination. And some later trials are conducted to determine seed viability over time in the form of retests. So the AVSB was a step forward in being able to capture that relationship while also aggregating seed bank data from across Australia. So the portal enables users to query this related seed bank data from a few different lenses. And the first lens that I'm going to explore is from a spatial lens. So as you can see here, we are on the home page and we are greeted with this lovely globe. And this lovely globe shows Australia, and it shows all of the seed collection locations for all of the records that we have in the virtual seed bank. So what we can do is zoom in and just provide a slightly more detailed photo of where we can see all of the seed collections across Australia. Now, in this spatial view, we are provided with a few options of what we can do, and we can really refine this data. So the first thing that we can do is we can draw a polygon or a spatial bound or area around which we want to see specific records. And you just click the points and double click to close the polygon. And then we are provided with this defined area where we're looking at records in this area. Now you may ask a very valid question. Well, I just see a few dots in a polygon, but where can I go from there? Well, Firstly, the actual individual dots are clickable for that area, and that brings up this little pop-up or side window, which provides all of the accessions that we have for that specific area. But more importantly, what we can do is we can click the View Records button, and this provides a more tabulated view of the data that we can then further interrogate and query. But I'll get to that in a little bit, because this spatial bounds functionality is a bit flexible. So we are able to draw not just one polygon, but multiple polygons. And if we so desire, we can move and reshape them. So we can really target the specific areas that we're interested in. We've also added the ability to show the inverse of this polygon. So if we click the inverse button, we are now querying for all of the records that do not fall within the polygons that we have just drawn. And of course, we can delete individual points or delete the polygons themselves, like so. But I will untick the inverse records, and I will interrogate this tabular data a little bit more. So you can see for the area that we've selected, we have 1,351 total records. And all of these records are displayed here with key bits of data about each accession. So from here, we can see the taxon, we can see the institution that holds the seed, the collection date, collection size, and a variety of other bits of data. What we can also do is we can click onto this record, and that expands the table and provides a little bit more information about this particular record. Now, we have named these fields and have tried to find the most appropriate name, but there might be some contextual information missing, and you may want to interrogate what does collection size mean, for instance. So all of the fields that we show on the portal, throughout the portal, have this really handy pop-up or tooltip, which tell you a bit more about the field and provide an example. And these are visible for our table headers as well. So within this subset of records for our spatial query, we can actually interrogate this data a little bit further. So if we have a click on the Filters tab, you can see that we're provided with a number of filters regarding the different bits of data for each accession record that we can refine by. So if we are looking for a collection or an accession which has more than, let's say, 2,000 seeds for that accession, then we can enter that filter. We can see it's visible up here, and all of our records are filtered accordingly. And we can apply multiple filters to this. We can also expand all of the records if you want a greater overview or picture of all of these records, or collapse them all. And we've also provided the ability to download these records. So if we have the handy download button in the top right-hand corner, we provide our organization name. In this case, it would be CSIRO, select a download reason, and then we can download all of these records that we have just queried. Now, this tracking is really useful, and it helps us provide insight into who is using the data in the portal and for what purpose. And this was one of the key changes that we made recently. So if I exit out of this, that was a spatial lens of the data of interrogating a map and maybe looking at a few accessions within specific bounds. But another lens which the portal supports would be a taxon lens. So I'm going to be providing two examples of taxa within the portal and what those interfaces look like and how we can interrogate data from that perspective. So the taxon that I'm going to start with is from the Lotus genus. So if I, yep, there we go. And as we click on that taxon, I will note that that is using the ALA search service. We leverage a lot of ALA services and systems when we were developing this application. But if we go into this Lotus taxon, we can see that we are also provided with another map, but in this instance, it's for all of the collection locations for the Lotus taxa or taxon. And we are provided with the same spatial querying functionality on this map as we are on the map on the home page. So we're more than welcome to define a spatial bound around these records and then interrogate these records from a more tabular view. But since this is a taxon lens on the data, we are also provided with a lot more supplemental information and additional information such as trials and media and things that I will get to in due course. But the other first thing that we can see is a classification breakdown. And this is just for reference. You can see the whole classification of the taxon that you're looking at. And you can also move up the taxonomy change. So if we go to the Lotus genus and reload, we see a few more records, and we can see that now we're looking at the Lotus genus rather than that specific taxon. Now, we can also link out to the accepted names or the accepted taxonomy or classification through handy links on that taxon sidebar as well. Moving on, we have our accessions tab. Now, this tab will be very familiar just from the previous view that we looked at in terms of the spatial querying. And these are the accessions for the Lotus. Again, we have the same querying filtering capabilities. So if we open up this sidebar and we want a collection with the collection size that is bigger than 1,000, we can apply that filter as well. And again, very similar to the previous interface that was shown, we can click further and interrogate a few more bits of this data. We also have a full record view for each accession, which is available in this all details button here. So upon clicking, we can see the full details of the record, which now include a herbarium voucher and the storage seed bank. If we scroll down, we see additional data that we've stored as measurements and facts that just provide some more supplemental context about this accession record. So we can see that it was in batch 15. We can see the supplied name, the name that we were provided when we received the data, as well as what we matched to. And in this instance, it's matched to the same name. We also see a collection timeline. So when the seed was collected, when it was in storage, and we're also provided with a map of the collection location, just with a pinpoint this time for the one collection location. And there is supplementary information about the decimal latitude and longitude, the locality, and a link to the Australasian Virtual Herbarium, which is another one of the platforms that the ALA runs just to provide herbarium information about different species. If we scroll a bit further down, we are providing a contact block. So if ever you want to get in touch and you have some further queries about this particular accession or the portal, we have a seed partnership. Well, there's the seed partnership email there. And there's also the ALA support channels that you're more than welcome to reach out on and ask any questions. We also have a link to the seed bank, which is the owner of this seed, which we will get to in a little bit. And we also have the related trials for this particular accession. Now, instead of looking on this specific interface, I will then switch over to the trials tab, because this is the other, I guess, key view in the entire application, which provides a lot of useful information about different trials that have been conducted on different accessions of seed. So we can see, for instance, there was a very successful trial with this accession with an adjusted germination of 100%. And clicking on this record again shows additional information. So it shows the media substrate, the day temperature, night temperature, and any pre-treatment, as well as how successful the test was with different metrics, as well as the test length. And all of this data is, again, completely queryable. We have different categorized sets of queries where we can interrogate this data a bit further and then download this data if we so desire. As we move along, we've got the media page. Again, this is now getting into more supplemental information that's still very useful and relevant for the taxa. So this draws on the ALA images service, and this shows in two sections. It shows specimen images, and it also shows other related images to the taxon. So as we can see here, as we click through the images, we get a brief overview of the different parts of metadata, including the original width and height of the images, what they're licensed under, and the file format. So useful information, as well as which institution provided the images. We do have the option to view the original image. We show a thumbnailed version here because, as you can see, the original width and height are quite large images, which is fantastic, but takes a long time to load in a browser. So we have that functionality there, as well as our other associated images. And in this instance, this was from iNaturalist. We also have provided a link to view more images on the ALA species page. So you can see all of the specimen images in the gallery, and we can also use this to just look at this taxon on the ALA species page for some more greater breadth of information about this species. One of the last tabs is the Traits tab. Now, this Traits tab provides all of the data which is supplied by Austraits. And again, this is another great supplemental resource just to provide a little bit more information about this taxon. And we've also provided links to the definitions as they're supplied by Austraits. As you navigate through this view, we have a little helper indicator here. So we give a brief description of each page, just in case you're wondering broadly what the page is about. We provide the option to copy the taxon ID if we're doing more developmental work or work with other ALA tools and platforms. And we also provide another link to view this taxon on the ALA, similar to the species page link, which I just navigated to. Finally, we have a sequences link, which is just a really simple link which redirects to NCBI, so you can view any genomic data for the species if that is what you are looking for. So that was the taxon view summary for a species which is a normal non-threatened species. We can also search for a species that is from the Carex genus. If you bear with me as here we go, navigate to this taxon. Now we can see for this taxon, this taxon is listed under sensitive legislation in Western Australia. And in that instance, we withhold the information just for security and for the species. We also have a conservation status that is associated with this taxon, which is priority 3 poorly known species in WA as well. But we're still provided with the same taxonomic breakdown on the right-hand side. And a key part of this portal and resource is that all of the accession information for species that are listed under either sensitive or conservation legislation is that all of the accession information is still available. So the locational information gets redacted, but it still provides a really valuable resource in terms of how much seed a seed bank has, how it is stored, and the relevant tests that are conducted on each seed or each accession of seed. So as we can see here, we've got the collection size, collector, another herbarium voucher, and the same sorts of filters and bits of data that we had when looking at the other taxon. Again, if I move to the trials tab, we can see here that we have a few trials associated with this. And again, we can click the record to have a more holistic view. Since trials are related to accessions, we do have a view accession button for trials. So we can click that and it will provide us a summary of that accession, but also a direct link to then go to that full accession record on that page that we showed earlier. With media, again, we have specimen images as well as some other supplemental images for that taxon. These are filterable, for lack of a better word, as well. So you can filter by a current state or the month that the image was taken for these images, and more trait information for these images as well. Moving back to the homepage, we'll look at another lens, which is a really key lens and one of the newest developments for the portal that was released recently, which is a statistical or conservation lens on the data. So if we move to the seed bank snapshot page, At first glance, we are provided with high-level statistics about the portal, so how many accessions, trials, and treatments are in the portal, as well as how many organizations have supplied data, how many species have an accession, and how many species have a trial. And this is really important information to then, over time, track the portal's growth in terms of the data that we have ingested into the system. And highlight places where we could improve or do a bit better. But more along that line, we have our threatened species, which is more relevant to reporting. Before I jump to that, I should note that all of the AVSB records are available to download with this handy button, download all AVSB records. And that is if you want a complete data dump of everything that we have in the system. It's a handy helper for that function. When we scroll down, we see threatened species in our collection, and the first metric, I guess, that we use is the EPBC Act. So we have a count of how many nationally listed species under the EPBC Act we have in the portal, and this is again great for tracking progress in how many conservation species we have collected and how that can change over time. And it also provides some supplemental information about the EPBC Act and a link to the Act itself. If we scroll further down, we can see that there are state and territory listed species. So these are the amounts or the counts of species that are listed under each relevant state or territory legislation. So from this, we can see that there's 1,480 species that are listed under the Western Australia legislation. We should flag that even if a species has been collected outside of that jurisdiction, we still apply that conservation flag to it because it is still the species itself as a taxon is a conservation species under that legislation. So we have just a scrollable list here of all of the counts of species for each relevant piece of legislation. Finally, at the bottom of this page, we have a bit more of an interactive interface. First, we can download all protected species data, so all data that has been listed under a Conservation Act. But we have a data explorer, and this provides just a nice interface or overlay so we can filter and refine records based on these different state and territory legislations, and we can view the full accession records for these different groups of conservation listed species. So as you can see, it's automatically selected EPBC threatened species by default, but if we wanted, we could select a combination of South Australia and Victoria and unselect EPBC. And then you see our search is refined for all of the accession records for all of the species that are listed under this threatened legislation. There is a little exclamation mark in a triangle, which just provides a bit more information of what the conservation status is for this species. And again, this is the interface that we've seen many times, which is you can click on the record and expand, and it has the same filtering ability as the other variations of this interface, where we can search for different metrics. So for instance, we'll do something different. We'll go a storage temperature that is below 20, and it filters and does that storage temperature. So one final view that we're going to have a look at is the seed bank page, because that's just another helpful lens on the data. If we go to our dataset section of the front page, we can see that we have a list of all of the providers who have generously provided their data for the Australian Virtual Seed Bank portal. And if we click onto one of these buttons, we can see that we are provided with a map of all of the records that the National Seed Bank has provided. So we can again use the same spatial querying functionality to then interrogate this data a little bit more. And we can also view all of the individual species that they have provided in their data load to us, as well as some additional metadata like the temporal span of the records, when they were last updated, and the license that is applied to the data that has been shared with us. And at the bottom of the page, again, some helpful contact links for if you want to get in touch with the seed partnership. One final thing to note is we have a help FAQ section. So as you explore the portal and you are searching through records, but you may get stuck on a certain process or just want to know a little bit more about why a certain decision was made or why the portal functions in a certain way, this is a really great resource to step you through how to do the functions of the portal that I've walked through today. So filtering accessions and trials for a plant, viewing conservation statistics, and the like. So clicking on these will just provide you with a guided walkthrough and steps on how to perform different actions in the portal. Similarly, we've got FAQs. So a question that's asked very often is, how are these seeds accessed, or how can they be accessed? And this provides all of the information for those relevant questions like that. So I also just wanted to say that if there's any queries, anything that you're still unsure about, you can reach out either to the Seed Partnership or to the ALA support email for support. And in terms of the portal, it's also acknowledging that it's been a great collaboration between the ALA and the partnership, and that collaboration has really shaped the development of the portal. There are new exciting changes in the pipeline that will be released in the coming months. But that is for the future.